Halloween in the 60s wasn't about store-bought scares. It was homemade magic. Pillowcase costumes, caramel apples, and laughter under streetlights. Tonight, we promise to revisit that golden glow when Halloween was pure wonder, community, and childhood joy wrapped in the chill of autumn air. Trick-or-treating, door to door, the crunch of fallen leaves under small feet, the flutter of homemade costumes in the wind. Trick-or-treating wasn't just candy collection. It was adventure stitched into every doorstep. Children ran through neighborhoods with pillowcases and buckets, masks slightly crooked, laughter echoing under flickering street lamps. Neighbors left out bowls of sweets, apples, or even homemade treats, knowing that for one night the streets belonged to the kids. At first glance, it looked simple. In reality, it was much more. Families gathered at windows, sharing smiles and stories as shadows danced on the walls. Every knock was a thrill, every thank you a tiny victory. And as the night drew on, with pockets full of sweets and hearts full of delight, the streets fell silent. But the magic of those steps would linger long after the lights went out. Homemade costumes, scissors snipping, glue drying, and fabric scraps scattered across the living room floor. This was Halloween creativity at its finest. Kids, with the help of parents, transformed old sheets, cardboard, and buttons into witches, ghosts, superheroes, and creatures born from imagination. It faded away, but its memory still defines the decade. Each costume carried a story, a laugh, and a tiny rebellion against store-bought uniformity. Families worked together late into the evening, the smell of glue mingling with autumn air drifting through open windows. Mirrors reflected crooked masks and painted faces. But the pride in every child's eyes was perfect. Costumes weren't just for the street, they were a rite of passage, a shared memory. And while these creations twirled under lamplight, something sweeter and stickier was already waiting on the next doorstep, ready to spark another delight in the night.
Jack-o'-lanterns,
the scrape of a knife against pumpkin flesh, the smell of autumn spice and orange pulp filling kitchens. Hand-carved jack-o'-lanterns weren't just decorations. They were little beacons of imagination on every doorstep. Flickering candlelight cast dancing shadows, turning ordinary streets into avenues of mischief and wonder. It was more than decoration. It was a statement of the time. Families gathered around tables, laughing at uneven cuts and wonky smiles, each lantern reflecting a child's pride and a parent's patience. Some faces were silly, some scary, some completely inventive, but all glowed with the warmth of shared effort. As the night deepened and windows flickered with tiny fires, the pumpkins watched over the streets, silently inviting children to run, knock, and laugh. And just beyond the candlelight, the first hints of treats and surprises were beginning to appear on the porches. Halloween candy bags! The crinkle of paper, the clink of tin buckets, and the rustle of wrappers. Halloween candy bags carried more than sweets. Each bag was a vessel of excitement, anticipation, and tiny triumphs as children dashed from door to door. At first glance, it looked practical. In reality, it was much more. Every chocolate, toffee, or candy apple told a story. The generosity of neighbors, the thrill of a doorstep conquest, and the joy of discovering something new with every knock. Families watched from windows, smiling as small hands clutched overstuffed sacks and pockets bulged with sugar. The bags weren't just for candy. They were trophies, memories, and a small symbol of belonging. And as the night grew darker and the pockets fuller, the next tradition, the flicker of mischievous shadows and playful scares, was just waiting to leap from the corners of every street. Costume parties. Living rooms transformed into enchanted halls, candles flickering, shadows dancing across walls. Friends and family gathered, costumes slightly crooked, laughter spilling over the tables. Costume parties weren't just fun. They were a chance to step into someone else's shoes, to be a pirate, a witch, or a daring adventurer for a night. For families, it was just normal life. But today it feels strange. Games were played with fierce competitiveness, and treats were passed around like treasures. The air smelled of autumn, sweets, and the faint perfume of a carefully crafted disguise. Every laugh, every clumsy dance step, every shared story stitched the night into memory. And as the last piece of candy disappeared and the music faded, a quiet excitement lingered. For soon the streets themselves would come alive with little ghosts and ghouls running door to door. Witches and ghost decorations. Paper ghosts fluttered from ceilings, black cats perched on windowsills, and witches' silhouettes danced in the candlelight. Families spent hours cutting, drawing, and hanging decorations, turning ordinary homes into mini haunted worlds. The charm was obvious, but so were the problems. Fingers sticky with glue, scissors bent from countless snips, and the occasional tear in tissue paper didn't matter. The magic was in the creation itself. Every window told a story. Every shadow hinted at a playful fright. Neighbors peeked with curiosity. Children pressed noses to the glass, and laughter filled the hallways. These handmade figures weren't just decoration. They were an expression of imagination, mischief, and tradition. And as the last ghost swayed in the autumn breeze, the faintest whisper of orange candlelight hinted at what was coming next. The glowing, grinning faces of jack-o'-lanterns lighting up the streets. Spooky storytelling. The flicker of a fireplace, the quiver of a lantern, and the hush that fell over children as the first words of a ghost story were spoken. Spooky storytelling wasn't just entertainment. It was a ritual, a way for families to gather close, share shivers, and pass down tales that blurred the line between imagination and reality. This detail says more about the 60s than you might expect. Shadows danced across faces, eyes widened at each twist, and hands clutched at warm blankets as whispers of witches, ghosts, and haunted houses filled the room. Every pause, every gasp became a shared heartbeat. And as the final boo echoed and the fire crackled low, a new kind of thrill waited just outside. The crisp night air ready to carry little feet racing door to door for treats. Apple bobbing. A tub of water, shiny red apples floating on the surface, and the laughter of children leaning over, trying to catch one with only their teeth. Apple bobbing wasn't just a game. It was a splash of fun, a test of skill, and a moment of silly triumph. The charm was obvious, but so were the problems. Hair got wet, faces splashed, and occasionally an apple escaped with a mischievous flip, sending giggles erupting across the room. Schools, community halls, and living rooms became arenas of friendly competition, where cheers and encouragement echoed. Every bite of a bobbed apple was victory, every miss a reason to try again. And as dripping hair and sticky smiles settled, another tradition was already calling from the shadows. The glow of candlelit jack-o'-lanterns waiting to light the streets for trick-or-treaters. Haunted houses. Creaking doors, dim corridors, and the faint smell of hay and candle wax. Haunted houses weren't just attractions, they were adventures crafted by communities and families alike. At first glance, it looked practical. In reality, it was much more. Cardboard tombstones, cobwebs stretched across hallways, and hidden speakers playing eerie sounds created a world of suspense and delight. Children clutched each other's hands, hearts racing as witches, ghosts, and skeletons leapt from corners. Adults watched with quiet pride, knowing they'd built a night full of thrills and laughter. Every scream, every nervous giggle became part of the story. And as visitors stumbled out, blinking at the cold night air, the next surprise waited just around the corner. Little hands ready to knock on doors for sweets, carrying the excitement of trick-or-treating into the streets. Glow-in-the-dark candles. Soft flickers of light danced across windowsills, casting long shadows and painting the night with mystery. Glow-in-the-dark candles weren't just illumination, they were enchantment, turning ordinary homes into magical spaces for Halloween. It was more than decoration. It was a statement of the time. Families placed them carefully, watching as the gentle glow mingled with jack-o'-lanterns, highlighting witches, ghosts, and black cats. The scent of wax mingled with autumn air. The tiny flames reflected in eager eyes, and the world outside seemed to hold its breath. Every street felt alive with secrets, and every shadow whispered a story waiting to unfold. And as the candles flickered low, another tradition was quietly preparing to light up the night. Children's costumes rustling, ready to sprint from door to door for treats. Homemade Halloween treats. The sticky sweetness of caramel dripping from apples, the warm scent of pumpkin pies baking in ovens, and the bright colors of candy corn scattered across plates. Homemade Halloween treats were more than food. It faded away, but its memory still defines the decade. Families gathered around kitchens, rolling, stirring, and tasting as they crafted delights that carried laughter and love in every bite. If these memories take you back, hit the like button and share your favorite Halloween treat in the comments. Children eagerly licked spoons, smudged frosting on noses, and marveled at the results of their sticky, messy creativity. Every treat was a small triumph, a reward for effort and imagination, and a way to share the magic of Halloween with friends and neighbors. And as the last sweet disappeared and pockets were prepared for the night ahead, the streets themselves were already stirring, waiting for little feet in costumes to bring the evening alive. Monster movies on TV. The flicker of black and white images on a small television, shadows leaping across walls, and the low hum of the screen filled living rooms with suspense. Monster movies weren't just entertainment, they were a doorway to thrilling chills, imaginative frights, and shared screams. For families, it was just normal life. But today, it feels strange. Children huddled under blankets, clutching siblings, or a parent's hand as Dracula, Frankenstein, and unseen creatures prowled the screen. The smell of popcorn mingled with the autumn air drifting through open windows, and every creak in the house became part of the story. Each film became a rite of passage, a lesson in courage and laughter alike. And as the credits rolled and the screen went dark, the next adventure, glowing jack-o'-lanterns and children dashing door to door, was quietly waiting to burst into the night. Paper lanterns and pumpkins. Hand-cut paper lanterns swayed in the evening breeze, and pumpkins, hollowed and glowing, lined windowsills and porches. It was more than decoration. It was a statement of the time. Families spent hours creating these simple yet enchanting lights, folding, cutting, and carving with care. Children pressed their faces to windows, watching the warm flicker bring shadows to life, while neighbors admired the glow spilling onto streets lined with leaves. Each lantern and pumpkin carried the personality of its maker: quirky smiles, crooked stars, and jagged grins, a testament to imagination and effort. As the evening deepened and the lights shimmered across the neighborhood, another layer of Halloween was quietly preparing. Small hands clutching candy bags, ready to race from doorstep to doorstep, carrying the joy of homemade magic into the night. Costume parades. The streets and schoolyards filled with laughter, footsteps, and the swish of homemade costumes as children proudly showed off their creations. Costume parades weren't just about looking good. They were celebrations of creativity, community, and the joy of being a little different for a day. At first glance, it looked practical. In reality, it was much more. Parents clapped from the sidelines, teachers beamed, and every tiny mask, cape, or hat told a story. Crowds cheered as witches, ghosts, and superheroes marched together, a kaleidoscope of imagination moving in unison. Each parade became a memory etched in both heart and neighborhood, and as the last child waved and the crowd dispersed, another kind of excitement waited in the quiet streets. The thrill of door-to-door trick-or-treating, candy bags swinging and pumpkins glowing under autumn moonlight. Trick-or-treat etiquette. A neatly placed bowl of sweets on the porch, a soft knock, and the rustle of paper bags. Trick-or-treat etiquette wasn't just manners, it was part of the ritual. At first glance, it looked practical. In reality, it was much more. Neighbors prepared treats with care, knowing little hands would reach out, eyes wide with excitement. Some offered chocolates, others apples or handmade goodies, each candy a tiny act of generosity. Children learned gratitude, patience, and respect as they moved from doorstep to doorstep. The evening air filled with laughter and the crunch of leaves underfoot. It was a silent agreement that everyone participated in the magic. And as the last treats disappeared and the night grew quiet, another layer of Halloween stirred nearby. Homemade costumes waiting for their moment to sparkle under streetlights. Halloween music and records. The crackle of a needle on vinyl, followed by the upbeat howl of Monster Mash, filled living rooms with playful spooks and irresistible rhythm. It was more than decoration. It was a statement of the time. Families gathered around record players, tapping feet and clapping hands, while children danced in costumes that twirled with every note. Ghostly organ riffs and bubbling sound effects made even the smallest space feel like a haunted ballroom. Music wasn't just background. It was the heartbeat of the evening, guiding games, storytelling, and laughter. And as the last record spun and the needle lifted, another kind of thrill waited just outside. Glowing jack-o'-lanterns, crisp leaves underfoot, and the first excited knocks of trick-or-treaters racing through the streets. Scarecrow displays, straw-stuffed shirts, floppy hats, and painted faces transformed ordinary gardens into whimsical, slightly spooky spectacles. For families, it was just normal life, but today it feels strange. Homemade scarecrows weren't merely decoration. They were expressions of creativity, humor, and community pride. Children helped tie, stuff, and pose each figure, while neighbors admired the quirky personalities peering from every yard. Some were silly, some frightening, all captivating. The rustle of straw in the wind and the occasional squeak of wooden limbs added an extra layer of charm. Each scarecrow told a story, a snapshot of autumn energy, frozen in time. And as the evening shadows grew long, the next kind of excitement waited nearby. Little hands clutching candy bags, racing through streets filled with glowing pumpkins and laughter, ready to light up the night. Autumn leaves and corn stalks. Crisp leaves crunched underfoot, golden and red drifting from trees, while corn stalks leaned against doorways and fences, swaying gently in the breeze. At first glance, it looked practical. In reality, it was much more. Families brought the harvest indoors and outdoors, creating a warm, seasonal atmosphere that set the stage for Halloween festivities. Children gathered piles of leaves to scatter across yards, laughing as they jumped and kicked through the colors, while neighbors admired the rustic charm spilling from porches. Every leaf and stalk told a story of autumn's arrival and the anticipation of Halloween night. And as the scent of damp leaves mingled with the cool evening air, another layer of enchantment was quietly preparing. Handcrafted paper lanterns and glowing pumpkins ready to cast shadows and spark excitement across the neighborhood. Homemade masks, cardboard, paint, fabric, and a little imagination transformed into masks that could be scary, silly, or surprisingly clever. The charm was obvious, but so were the problems. Children spent hours cutting, gluing, and painting, often smudging paint on their faces and hands in the process. Every mask carried personality, a crooked smile, a glittering eye, or an oddly shaped nose, reflecting the maker's creativity and sense of fun. Parents watched with pride, laughing at the mess while marveling at the results. Masks weren't just costumes. They were small works of art, portals to a playful, magical world. And as the last mask was strapped into place and little hands clutched candy bags, the streets outside quietly prepared to come alive, ready for the laughter, footsteps, and excitement of trick-or-treating. Tarot or fortune-telling games. A flicker of candlelight, a deck of cards, and a circle of friends leaning in with wide eyes. Halloween fortune-telling was as much about imagination as it was about mystery. This detail says more about the 60s than you might expect. Children and adults alike tried their hands at predicting futures, giggling at silly outcomes, or marveling at eerily accurate insights. Paper fortunes and homemade props turned living rooms into tiny, mystical worlds, where suspense mingled with laughter and a touch of wonder. Every drawn card and whispered prediction became part of a shared story, a memory that lingered long after the game ended. And as the last fortune was revealed and the candle burned low, another layer of Halloween excitement was quietly waiting. Streets filled with glowing pumpkins, rustling leaves, and eager trick-or-treaters racing from door to door. Pumpkin carving contests. Families gathered in kitchens and gardens, knives and spoons in hand, as pumpkins transformed into grinning, gaping, or mischievous faces. It faded away, but its memory still defines the decade. Children and adults competed for the scariest, funniest, or most inventive designs. Laughter and playful teasing filling the air. Shavings scattered across tables, candlelight reflected in eager eyes, and every pumpkin held a little personality. Some spooky, some charming, all memorable. Neighbors strolled past to admire the creations, offering nods of appreciation or chuckles at particularly clever designs. And as the last pumpkin flickered with candlelight, another Halloween thrill quietly awaited. Handmade costumes and eager children ready to dash from doorstep to doorstep, carrying laughter and candy bags into the crisp autumn night. Candy corn, tiny, colorful triangles spilling from bowls into eager hands. Candy corn was more than a sweet treat. It was a symbol of Halloween itself. What was once everywhere has almost vanished without a trace. Children's eyes lit up at the simple combination of white, orange, and yellow, savoring the chewy sweetness as families exchanged stories and laughter around them. Kitchens smelled faintly of sugar, while small paper bags filled with candy corn joined the parade of treats ready for trick-or-treaters. Each kernel carried a sense of tradition, nostalgia, and the excitement of the season. And as the last handful disappeared and the evening shadows stretched across porches, another Halloween ritual quietly stirred. The playful thrill of homemade masks, ready to turn ordinary faces into creatures of imagination. Black cat imagery, sleek silhouettes perched on windowsills, paper cutouts dangling from doors, and tiny figurines peeking from corners. Black cat imagery added a playful, spooky charm to every home. Behind the style was a hidden story about the decade itself. Families carefully arranged these symbols of mystery and superstition, delighting in the mischievous presence they brought to rooms and porches. Children tiptoed around them, them, imagining shadowy paws and glinting eyes, while neighbors admired the creativity and whimsy of each display. The charm was simple yet unmistakably magical, tying homes and streets together in the spirit of Halloween. And as the cat's shadows flickered in the candlelight, another tradition quietly waited to come alive. The fun and laughter of homemade treats, caramel apples and candy corn ready to sweeten the night. Community trick-or-treat routes. Rows of houses, each glowing with pumpkins, lanterns, and handmade decorations, created streets alive with Halloween magic. It was more than decoration, it was a statement of the time. Children ran from doorstep to doorstep, paper bags swinging, laughing with friends as neighbors greeted them warmly. Every house was part of the story, each porch a stage for spooky silhouettes, cobwebs, and flickering candlelight. Parents strolled along, chatting, watching little feet hop over leaves and dodge pumpkins, while streets hummed with excitement. The sense of community, shared creativity, and simple joy made Halloween feel like a neighborhood-wide celebration. And as the last knocks faded into the night, another tradition quietly stirred nearby. Cozy corners where ghost stories waited to be told, ready to send shivers and laughter through the chilly autumn air. Halloween greeting cards, illustrated ghosts, smiling witches, and mischievous black cats adorned thick cardstock, carried in envelopes with a curl of wax or a splash of color. For families, it was just normal life, but today it feels strange. Sending Halloween cards wasn't merely about greetings. It was a small act of connection, a way to share the magic of the season across streets or even towns. Children carefully chose their favorite designs, sometimes adding handwritten notes or drawings of their own, while parents licked stamps and tucked cards into mailboxes. Each card carried warmth, humor, and a touch of playful spookiness, a reminder that Halloween was as much about thoughtfulness as it was about candy and costumes. These little pieces of paper weren't just decorations, they were memories folded, stamped, and sent with love. Which of these Halloween memories takes you straight back to your childhood? Share your favorite moments in the comments and subscribe to keep these nostalgic traditions alive, one story at a time.